President Trump as commander-in-chief, the world is a much safer place. Our allies agreed to invest 5% of their GDP annually in defense. The president wants peace. He always has.
Welcome to Hidden Headlines, our deep dive segment. We've got some really potent statements here today from Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt, giving us a direct line into the administration's view on some major world events and domestic policies under President Trump.
That's right. And our job today is to unpack these, really get into the meat of what's being said, the implications, the priorities it reveals.
Exactly. We want you to have a clear lens on this. So let's jump right in. The first big one is this overarching statement from Leavitt. With President Trump as commander-in-chief, the world is a much safer place.
With President Trump as commander-in-chief, the world is a much safer place.
Quite a claim.
It is, and it really sets the stage for their whole foreign policy philosophy, doesn't it? It emphasizes strength, decisive action, taking on what they call rogue regimes head on.
No ambiguity there.
None. The idea presented is that this decisiveness strengthens alliances because friends know where America stands, and it deters adversaries because they see the willingness to act. It's about projecting power for stability.
And it does raise that question. How do you measure safer in such a messy world? The administration's answer seems to be, well, through tangible results from direct action.
Precisely. Which leads us neatly into the next point, a really specific and very serious one concerning Iran.
Yeah, Leavitt stated, and this is a quote, "The Iranian regime was weeks away from being able to produce a nuclear weapon that would threaten the entire world."
The Iranian regime was weeks away from being able to produce a nuclear weapon that would threaten the entire world before President Trump took this decisive action on Saturday night to obliterate their nuclear capabilities.
Weeks away.
That's incredibly close. And the follow-up, according to these statements, was direct military action by the U.S. against Iran's nuclear facilities.
Based on intelligence suggesting that threat was imminent, right?
Yeah.
Not just a possibility, but right around the corner.
Exactly. The justification provided was preventing Iran from getting that weapon, which they argued would destabilize, well, everything. Not just the Middle East, but globally.
And the assessment afterward.
The materials cite intelligence reports calling the strikes absolutely successful. And even stronger, a total obliteration of the immediate capability. The stated goal was achieved: eliminate Iran's near-term path to a bomb.
Wow. Total obliteration. That's definitive language. It reflects that forceful approach you mentioned.
No question. It signals a very low tolerance for perceived existential threats reaching a critical point. A very muscular foreign policy in action.
Okay, so from direct military intervention, let's talk alliances. Specifically NATO. Leavitt brought up a really significant shift in funding.
Yes, the 5% GDP target.
Right. She said allies agreed to invest 5% of their GDP annually in defense because the president demanded it.
Our allies agreed to invest 5% of their GDP annually in defense because President Trump demanded it. This will be the most significant reinforcement of NATO's collective defense in the history of the NATO alliance.
And that's presented as truly historic. The description is the most significant reinforcement of NATO's collective defense in the history of the NATO alliance. That's a monumental claim.
It really is. And the underlying message seems to be about fairness, about rebalancing the scales.
Absolutely. The implication, quite clearly stated, is that the United States will carry less of the burden. It tackles that long-standing issue head-on, the perception that America was footing too much of the bill for European security.
So the demand wasn't just about more spending overall, it was about shifting the proportions, making it more equitable from the U.S. perspective.
Correct. Enhancing collective security by ensuring everyone invests significantly, not just relying on the U.S. It's a redefinition of the partnership, driven by American insistence.
Okay, let's pivot now. Bring it home, so to speak.
Yeah.
Domestic policy. Leavitt talked about something called the One Big Beautiful event.
Sounds like quite the rally.
Doesn't it? And it's all focused on rallying Republicans for the One Big Beautiful Bill.
Which she defines as
the largest tax cut for working and middle-class Americans in history.
Later this afternoon here at the White House, the president will host a One Big Beautiful event in the East Room to rally Republicans to get the One Big Beautiful Bill across the finish line.
Again, very strong, very specific language.
And the purpose of the event, clearly, is unity. Getting the party squarely behind this major piece of legislation championed by President Trump.
It's presented purely as economic relief, isn't it? Boosting the economy by putting money back into the pockets of working and middle-class families.
That's the core message. Stimulate growth from the bottom up and middle out. The language, one big beautiful bill, is obviously marketing. It's designed to create excitement and a very positive public image.
Hard to miss that, yeah. Making the legislative push sound as appealing as the promised outcome. Very direct.
Very. It's about building momentum and popular support for a key domestic agenda item.
All right, finally, let's touch on peace efforts, specifically in the Middle East. Leavitt brought up the Abraham Accords.
Right, a major diplomatic achievement from earlier.
And she said, the president wants peace. He always has. And then mentioned seeing a new era where more Gulf and Arab states might join the accords.
The president wants peace. He always has. And right now we're on a diplomatic path with Iran. The president and his team, namely Special Envoy Witkoff, continue to be in communication with the Iranians and especially our Gulf and Arab partners in the region.
This points to ongoing diplomatic work, trying to build on that foundation. The Abraham Accords started that normalization between Israel and several Arab nations.
Which is groundbreaking itself.
Absolutely. And the idea here is to expand that circle, bring more countries into normalized relations with Israel, fostering, broader cooperation and stability across the region.
So connecting the dots, it's about building regional partnerships to create a more peaceful Middle East based on that initial accords framework.
That's the picture painted here. Active diplomacy aimed at fundamentally reshaping regional dynamics through these agreements.